Let's talk about the special Autism edition of Time magazine. Here it is. So, a few takeaways from this, and you'll see my lovely whiteboard once again. So, the genes are found to account for about 80% of whether or not autism is going to present in a child. About 20% is environmental factors. But what's important to understand is these environmental factors, they play a role ahead of time. So prenatally, not after the child is born. So what are some of those environmental factors? We have parental age, because the DNA has these microdeletions over time, especially after 40. We have if there's type 2 diabetes or hypertension in the mother while she's pregnant. She's prescribed Depakote during pregnancy, which is typically an anti-seizure medication. If mom has a high fever or an infection during pregnant. If there's microplastics in the system that may or may not contribute. Birth complications, especially with anoxia, which is lack of oxygen to the brain. Air pollutants can also potentially play a role, as well as pesticides. And also preterm birth. So children who are born earlier have a higher risk. So the time and the circumstance of the expression varies, but it's all determined prior to the child being born. So this 1 in 31, for example, that number, that ratio is based on only 9,000 children from 15 out of the 50 states, and only children ages 4 to 8. And there was significant variability among states. There is also a significant rise in recent years in those being diagnosed who either A, in the 26 to 34 age range, they experienced a 450% increase from prior years, and those who do not have co-occurring intellectual disability or developmental delays. So we're seeing people who are older, quote unquote, higher and less support need. Now, we also know that there can be a CMA, which is a chromosomal microarray analysis, say that 3 times fast, looking for genetic anomalies that are commonly associated with autism. So Fragile X, Angelman, Williams, even Down syndrome. There are some groups that are left out of the research or do not always receive the same attention and care. For example, Black and Latinx children are typically diagnosed 3 years later than their white same-aged peers. And oftentimes parents of color are actually blamed for their child's behavior, and it's labeled poor parenting or laziness before they get to a true diagnosis. And many of these children are not screened by their pediatrician. In fact, in the special edition, one Black mother explained that she was the only Black mother at a support group for parents of children with autism, and that she raised concerns about her child's interaction with law enforcement, and she was told that the police would automatically recognize that her child was autistic and they would act accordingly, which made her feel further isolated and frustrated. Another group that's been left out is the profound autism category, which a lot of parents are advocating for a separate label because of the unique and tough challenges and financial and emotional stressors that come along with that. In fact, one mother in the article described how her child would bite his tongue to the point where he had 25% of his tongue missing, and that if he continued to do so, he would have to be placed on a feeding tube because he wouldn't be able to eat orally. These children are also often left out of research studies, and it's very challenging to find long-term placements once they graduate from high school. Wait lists for SSI, housing, group homes, and such can be up to 10 years. So I think this is important, both for someone like myself as a clinician, but also for parents to understand the realities of the cause, the experience, the areas in which we can do better as a society to support these families. This was a very comprehensive special edition overall. However, I did feel that it left out a couple things. I think it could have gone into more depth in terms of the diagnostic piece, not just relying on, quote unquote, gold standard measures that don't necessarily translate to different presentations of autism, as well as the lack of LGBTQIA population and the overlap between queerness and autism that was not touched upon. But I do think there was a number of things that they did get right and a number of statistics that were very helpful.